So we have our HTML structure, our outline created. Now we start adding our CSS to be able to visualize that blocked out space. So once again, I'm just going to take a look at my wireframe, and on my wireframe I have noted to myself here the position I'm going to start with. And I might make some changes here depending on the result that I'm getting. But we should be pretty close with what we have here with this wireframe. Now keep in mind, we're not going to have something that looks exactly like this. It'll be close, but I'm going to guess at some of the widths, heights, margins, things like that. So I'm not really going to try to make exactly what's here, because the content later on will adjust the heights and push things around and will create something that is much more visually similar to what we see here. I'm just at this point trying to block things out, okay? And again, to get a visual for where they are. So let's start at the top with our CSS. And you're going to note I have all measurements will be in rems. And when I'm completely finished with this and I've done all the little tweaks and fine tuning, then I'm going to go back and convert all of my absolute pixels into rems. Okay, and you'll note that we have our font size 26, so this will be our root M, if you will. And then on the body of the document, I'm going to have a background image. Actually, we'll talk about that part in another video, but I know there's going to be something to do with the body, so I'm just creating that rule for now, and then I'll fill it in later. Then what I'm going to call a mini reset, and later on in another exercise we'll talk about using a reset, and my favorite is a Meyer reset. But in this case, we're going to use our universal selector. We're going to zero out the margin, the padding, and then we're going to add our box sizing border box, which will be our CSS3 version of the CSS box model. Okay, and then now that the margin is zeroed out and the padding is zeroed out for all elements, because remember the universal selector will apply these properties and their values to all of the other elements. So now I don't have to call out margin. I know the margin and the padding will be zeroed out, especially that's helpful with type. So I'll only have to add margin or padding if I'm actually going to add one of the two. All right, so now let's take a look at our container. The position's relative. I'm setting a width of 1080 because at one point it's my intention that I want this to work on a typical Galaxy device, like a Galaxy 6 to a Galaxy 10, and not like the 10 Plus, not the one that has the different, larger screen, but the typical Galaxy. And you can target to whatever devices you want. Right now, this is going to appear as if I'm targeting a desktop, but really my intent is later on this will work on a mobile device. And this 1080 happens to be a 4-up pixel density for a Galaxy device. Okay, the height I'm going to leave it auto. I'm going to let the content adjust the height. The margin, we're going to push 50 pixels from the top, 50 pixels from the bottom, and we're going to center our container. So we'll just add auto for our right and our left margin. So our container will be centered in the middle of our browser window. I'm adding border, 1 pixel solid black border to all of the elements so I can see them. Simple as that. Okay. So the next thing we're going to deal with is our header. And this will be relative position. I'm going to give some width. I'm not going to worry about the height. We're just going to let these numbers that I've placed inside the different elements kind of establish their height, just so we can visually see them. Okay, and then I'm using margin to move the header around relative to where it is inside of the container, beginning from the upper left corner. Then we have our main element. And remember, our main element is going to hold a rocket graphic and also a section which will hold our lyrics. So the main will be relative, and then I'm going to establish some width. Again, the height will be auto because the content is going to deal with the height. Or I might change this depending on how I'm going to place the image. I'm not yet sure if I'm going to have a background image or if I'm going to use an inline image. I'll figure it out. We are moving this element around with some margin. Then we have our rocket. Our position will be relative. I'll establish some width. The height will be auto. You'll notice that I'm using negative margin. That's because if we take a look at our rocket number 7, our rocket moves up and outside to the left of number 3, which is our main element. So I'm using relative position and negative numbers to move this around. Now, I could have used absolute position, but I try to stay away from using absolutes. It's okay, but we try to use relative position as much as possible. And then later on, we'll work with floats, and we'll use flex also for getting our layouts and creating our layouts. Okay, but right now this one is pretty simple. We're going to use relative and absolute positions. So section will also be relatively positioned. I'm establishing some width, and then we're using margin to move the section around inside of main. So main is the parent, rocket is a graphic, and section will hold the lyrics. Then we have our footer, and I have my position set for absolute, and then I actually made an error right here, left. This would be bottom and left. Okay, now I have absolute on here now because I just want to visualize where the footer is, and it wouldn't really behave correctly because the planets are absolutely positioned. Okay, so I'll probably change this to relative later on, but for right now I'm just going to use absolute, and we'll use bottom and left to make the footer go to the bottom of our element. Okay, and then the width will be 100%, so it will be 100% of whatever the container's width. And then you'll see we have planet 1, planet 2, planet 3. Each has absolute position. I'm using top left, top right, right bottom to position these 3 planets. And then we'll establish some width, and we'll also establish, actually I'm going to leave the height at auto. Okay, so what we should see is, I'm going to go ahead and zoom out of this. Hopefully it'll all fit on the screen okay. So we're just getting a rough layout of our container, which is number 1. There's the 1. Okay, it's actually hiding behind planet, which is number 4. Okay, and then here's our header. There's our number 7. Okay, and then 8 is showing up down here, and there's 3. All right, and right now it's because of the margins that I've set on 7 and 2 and 8. They're all just kind of doing something kind of strange here, but they're showing up relatively where I want them. So there's the other planet 5, here's the other planet number 6, and then here is our footer. Okay, so we have established, let's go ahead and go back to 100% here. We've established our HTML structure based off of our wireframe. And then again, based off of our wireframe, we've come in and we have created the initial CSS. Okay, so just so it's a little easier for you to see, I'm just going to take a moment here, and here is the HTML, the body, and here's our universal selector and our container. Here's header, main, and rocket. Then we have our section for our lyrics and our footer. And then you will see our three styles for our divs and our that are holding Planet 1, Planet 2, and Planet 3.